The Plumas National Forest in winter is an unforgiving expanse of ice and silence. When snow falls thick enough, it buries not just the terrain, but the truth. In February 1978, 5 young men drove up a desolate mountain road and vanished. The ensuing investigation into the Yuba County Five became one of the most baffling cold cases in American history. The mystery begins with the singular, chilling piece of evidence they left behind. 70 miles from their intended destination, investigators found their 1969 Mercury Montego abandoned on a heavily rutted, snow-packed logging road deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The car was the red thread of this entire investigation. It sat at an elevation of 4,400 feet, far beyond where a low-riding sedan should travel in those conditions. Yet the vehicle was perfectly intact. There were no dents, no torn undercarriage, and no signs of a struggle. Rigorous vehicle forensic analysis shattered the initial theory of a simple navigation error. Mechanics found the Mercury in pristine working order. The gas tank was a quarter full, and the engine started immediately when hot-wired. Most damning was the way the car was lodged in the snow. It was not hopelessly stuck. 5 able-bodied men could have easily pushed it free. Instead, they walked away from a functioning shelter into lethal, freezing darkness. To understand why they abandoned the car, we must understand the men. Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias were avid sports fans from Yuba City, returning home from a basketball game. 4 had mild intellectual disabilities. Gary Mathias was an Army veteran living with diagnosed schizophrenia. They were creatures of habit, deeply tied to their families, and entirely unprepared for a high-altitude wilderness survival scenario. Constructing a forensic timeline of their final hours reveals a catastrophic deviation from their normal routine. They left a convenience store in Chico at approximately 10 p.m. Instead of taking the direct highway south to Yuba City, they turned east, driving relentlessly upward into the mountains. This route required deliberate, continuous steering through increasingly treacherous, winding roads for over 2 hours. Something or someone drove them up that mountain. Law enforcement hit an immediate wall. There were no tire tracks indicating a chase, and no footprints near the car to show which direction they fled. Snowstorms moving through the region quickly erased superficial evidence, freezing the investigation in its tracks. For months, search and rescue teams scoured the treacherous terrain, finding nothing but dead ends and deepening the profound sense of an environmental anomaly. The spring thaw finally surrendered the grim truth. 19 miles away from the abandoned Mercury, deep within the forest, investigators discovered a Forest Service trailer. Inside lay the emaciated remains of Ted Wire. He was wrapped in 8 layers of bedding, his feet severely frostbitten. The scene presented a terrifying paradox. It was a shelter stocked with heavy clothing, matches, and enough dehydrated food to keep all 5 men alive for a year. The autopsy of Ted Wire yielded a horrific timeline of suffering. The medical examiner determined he lived inside that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks before succumbing to starvation and hypothermia. He had lost nearly half his body weight. His beard growth indicated he survived long past the initial search efforts. Yet, despite being surrounded by untouched rations and a functioning propane heater, he slowly withered away in the freezing dark. The behavioral paralysis exhibited inside the trailer defies basic survival instincts. Weher was not alone during his final weeks. Forensic evidence, including open military rations requiring a specialized can opener, indicated others had been there. Someone had fed him, yet no one utilized the massive stockpile of freeze-dried meals just lockers away. The psychological profile of the group suggests a fatal deference to authority. Without specific instructions to consume the food, they simply starved.
A grim perimeter search around the trailer yielded the rest of the tragic puzzle. The skeletal remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found miles away on the opposite side of the road, their bones scattered by spring runoff. Jack Hewitt's remains were located closer to the trailer, identified only by his clothing and bone fragments. The wilderness had systematically erased the physical evidence of their desperate final march. The most haunting piece of the puzzle remains missing to this day. Gary Mathias, the Army veteran with psychiatric training and the only member without intellectual disabilities, was never found. His tennis shoes were discovered inside the Forest Service trailer, suggesting he took Weiher's leather boots when his own feet succumbed to the cold.
From that point, Mathias walked out into the unforgiving wilderness and vanished from the historical record entirely. Reconstructing Mathias's timeline is an exercise in forensic frustration. Without his daily medication, his psychiatric condition would have rapidly deteriorated within a matter of days. Did he experience a severe schizophrenic break that triggered the initial detour up the mountain? Or did he attempt to hike out for help after the others succumbed to the elements? The absence of his remains leaves a gaping hole in the narrative, obscuring the true sequence of events. The Sierra Nevada mountains are not merely a backdrop to this tragedy, they are an active hostile participant. Environmental conditions in February 1978 were exceptionally brutal, with snowpacks reaching staggering depths. The specific microclimate where the car was abandoned experienced a sudden, severe drop in temperature and visibility. The men were wearing light jackets and low-top shoes, thrust into a deep freeze environment that rapidly degrades cognitive function and physical coordination. Hypothermia does not just freeze the blood, it dismantles the mind. Modern forensic pathology shows that as core body temperature drops, victims experience profound confusion, apathy, and paradoxical undressing. This physiological reality explains the baffling decisions made that night. The decision to abandon a perfectly good car, the failure to light a fire in the trailer, the untouched food rations. The cold systematically stripped away their capacity for rational thought before it stopped their hearts. The Yuba County Five represents a terrifying collision between human vulnerability and an unforgiving landscape. The red thread of the pristine, abandoned Mercury Montego points to a psychological rupture rather than a mechanical failure. They were not victims of foul play, nor were they victims of a simple accident. They were victims of a cascading series of irrational decisions, amplified by a harsh environment and an underlying psychological fragility. Consider the footprints that were never found. A local man stranded in his own vehicle that same night reported seeing a group of men walking in the glow of headlights, ignoring his calls for help. Was it the 5 men from Yuba City? If so, their silence speaks to a state of profound shock or active delusion. The physical evidence of their presence was fleeting, a ghost story written in the snow. Every attempt to rationalize their actions hits a wall of contradictory evidence. If they were fleeing a threat, why lock the car doors? If they were seeking shelter, why bypass a fully stocked lodge just down the road from where they parked? The official record categorizes the incident as a tragic accident, but the sheer volume of behavioral anomalies refuses to fit neatly into that box. The case files remain a testament to the limits of forensic science. We must look at the profound tragedy of their dependence. These were men who relied on the structure of their families and their community to navigate the world. Stripped of that structure, isolated in the freezing dark, they were paralyzed. The tragedy in the trailer was not just a failure of survival.
It was a heartbreaking display of loyalty and confusion. They stayed together, they suffered together, and they died waiting for someone to tell them what to do. The timeline of the Yuba County Five is a slow, agonizing unraveling. It begins with the sharp, inexplicable turn off the highway and ends months later in a dark, freezing trailer. The hours between those 2 points are filled with silent, desperate miles walked through deep snow. It is a timeline that demands we look beyond the physical evidence and confront the terrifying reality of the human mind breaking down under the weight of extreme isolation. 50 years later, the mystery endures. The abandoned car on a lonely logging road remains a monument to a night where logic failed and the wilderness claimed 5 innocent lives. The investigation into the Yuba County Five proves that sometimes the most chilling mysteries are not born of malice, but of a quiet, catastrophic wrong turn into the dark. The red thread unravels, leading us not to a killer, but to the terrifying, silent indifference of the natural world.